Hi, my name's Jeff Rhodes, and this is another video on Office 365. And in this one, we're going to talk about SharePoint and how we can make a calendar that keeps appointments from overlapping. So where this came from is at the Air Force Academy, we had calendars for the individual tutors, and they wanted to make sure that we couldn't have two events that overlap each other. So you get like two cadets in there at the same time. So let me first tell you about my book. So I hope that you'll get this, and the files in this case are actually, you get them as part of the book. So we've got some actual files that we're going to upload, and that's the way you get them. And you can see the name of it's called Creating Business Applications with Office 365, Techniques in SharePoint, Power Apps, Power BI, and more. And this video, if you haven't subscribed, we'll have to have you subscribe so you know when there's new ones coming out. If you want to see more about the book, which as of this taping hasn't made it yet, but it's coming out pretty soon, December 2nd, 2019, so it may already be there, and it's getting some #1 new release in SharePoint guides right now. That changes all the time. So let's get started. So if we go into Office, and then I just clicked on SharePoint to get to one of the SharePoint sites. So I'm going to go into Samples. And what I'm just going to do is build a calendar, and then I'll show you the files that go with it. So we'll go into, I like to go to Site Contents first, and then we'll create a new list or a new app. Actually, they're both pretty much the same. Let's see what kind we have. And we'll make it a, let's see if we can find calendar there. And I'll just call it Tutor Calendar just to get it. What I always like to do in SharePoint is not put a space in there so I get a better URL. And we'll come in here. And then once I get to it, we can go to the settings and put our space back in. And we'll put it on the quick launch bar too, so we can get to it. That's what I was talking about. See how we get that nice URL, otherwise we got that %20 in here. So if we go to the calendar, we'll just do our test case. So if we just say, all right, well, this is today's date. If we put a, one event, we'll just say appointment, and it's from 1 to 2 o'clock. I'm not going to do anything with the categories and all that, but and then if I go put another appointment in at, say, the same time, or say, appointment 2, say I want to go from 1:30 to 2:30. After we've done our changes, we should stop. This should not be allowed, but right now works fine. And if we go to like the day view of it, these are right on top of each other. So that's what we're going to try to do. So what we've got is we've got 3 files. Let me open up Visual Studio. So I've got 3 files: check doublebook.js, check recurring events.js, and then we're going to use the jQuery. And we've talked about jQuery before in some of our other videos. So this one uses jQuery as well, but we're calling web services. So what SharePoint has built into it is the ability to call its services and get its object model from JavaScript. And that's the key to this whole thing. So the way we're going to do it, and I'll go back to SharePoint for just a minute, what we're going to do is go into the dialog box. So if I say edit the item, or if I do the new item, and we're basically, when we hit that save button, we're going to go ahead and call our web services, see if there's any events that overlap with, and if it is, we're going to say, hey, no, this overlaps, you can't do it, and we're going to stop saving it. And if it's okay, we'll let it through. So fairly sophisticated. The mechanics are pretty quick, but we'll spend most of the video just kind of showing how we put it together and so forth. But let's do the mechanics first. So going back here, we've got, this is mainly the one that I wrote here with some items, and what we basically do is there's SharePoint itself will call this pre-save item, and we're going to say false. And then we're going to override the save button. Okay, and we're going to find the save button, and we'll get into that a little bit later how we did it. And we're going to unbind click, and we're going to add the click, and we're going to do this check for overlap. So we'll do all this in the debugger, but we're going to basically go through and find all our data. So all we really have to do here is I've got it set by list name. So you do have to have, unique names for this to work. Now you could do the GUID, the generally globally unique identifier, and do it that way, but I've just done it here. So I'm going to call this tutor calendar, and it does need to match. If we go back to here, it needs to match not this name, but the name on the overall page. So let's see if we can go back to it. Yeah, it needs to match that. That's what we're kind of doing it by. So if you put a space in, you got to put the space in here. Okay, and I'm just going to save that. Here's what the other file. So this is, and I have the URL from this guy who did it on a blog, great set of functions. So there's basically a few different functions in here, and I talk about this more in the book, but what they do is they build some special JavaScript objects, and in particular go through and check some of this info going from when we get the event. So this turns around and calls the web service. The web service, this is a standard file that this Simpraxis Consulting put together, and it's minified, which just means it's got replaced with all the different very, reduced space. So that's why it's kind of funky. So you can't really even read that at all. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and add these to the actual dialog boxes for the edit window and the new window. So for that, we use SharePoint Designer. So I've got a different video that shows you how you can enable SharePoint Designer to do it, but I've got it open here, and I've got my site open as well. So if you didn't do it, you'd say open site, but I've already got it open. Oh, I thought I did. I guess I don't. So let's click it. Now SharePoint Designer is deprecated, they call it, which means it's it's not really being developed, but this is really the way to do it for this type of solution. So I still like it. About the only thing I use it for is editing either existing pages or forms or doing things like this. So we could go to lists and libraries. We see our tutor calendar here, but that doesn't help us much here. What we want to do is go to all files and then go to list and then go to tutor calendar. And you can see these are the forms we want to edit. But first thing we want to do is we're going to add in our files. So we're going to add files. We could drag them in too, which is how I often do it, but I have them here. So let's go to videos, and I've got our double booking. So I'm literally just going to add these 3 files right to the directory. All right, and then what I want to do is I want to edit. So I'm going to do the new and the edit one. I'm going to edit file in advanced mode. And it's a bit of a challenge to figure out exactly where you want to put it. So you just kind of get used to that. And let me find it. It's right here before the placeholder main like that. So I'll just put in a couple blank lines. And if you haven't added these in before, let's see. Oops, it moved it over to my other side here real quick. Not quite sure why it did that. Oh, I guess it closed it all together. Let's try it again. Not exactly what I wanted there. All right, so let's try it again. All right, so it took our things there. Okay, so let's go edit, advanced mode, placeholder main. There you go. So we say it's a JavaScript. Oops, don't want that. And we'll say source equals, and we don't have to put a path for it here. I'm going to pause for just a minute and get to the right directory. All right, so we've got our, I like to go and grab the name of the file first, and we just copy them here. And go back, we'll just paste them in like that. Like that, and then we can just grab these and all right, so we'll get our other ones, and it turns out to matter which one. So you want to put the jQuery one first. So put that one here, and then put the check recurring events one next. Oops. All right, and we copy this one. All right, and then we just save the file. And actually, I'm going to copy all three of these because we'll put those. We'll go ahead and put that in the other one as well. So we do the same thing on the new file and the, oops guys, go back in here. So notice you can tell it's been edited, and then we'll do the same on the new form. Edit with advanced mode. Find our placeholder main again. And save. So really, if we did everything right, which we'll test now, that is all you got to do to make it work. We'll spend more of the time on how does it work. Let's go back to SharePoint now. And I think this was yeah, there we go. And we'll go back to the daily view just so we can see it. So what should happen is if we edit this item, only content controls are allowed. The content page, it controls, I don't remember that one as well. I better pause the video for a minute, go see what that message means. All right, I went and looked up that error and went back to look at my notes. It looks like I didn't put the JS files in exactly the right spot. So we're going to go back to Designer again. And I was actually supposed to put these below that placeholder main instead of above it. So we'll try that. That's in the new. And then we'll go back here to the edit, same thing. So we'll take that out and put it inside the main. So that's a SharePoint error itself. We'll see if that took care of it. All right, so let's refresh this just to make sure it's alone. Let's click that. All right, so that's good. So now what should happen is the minute I hit save, it should tell me I have an error. Nope, didn't work, but didn't give me an error either. Let's try a new one. Test appointment. And it's trying to overlap it, so we'll say, yeah, so it's not quite doing what we want. It's preventing me from saving. So let's try from 3 to 4. It should save. So not actually working it quite right at all. So let me pause it, see if I can figure out what's going on, and we'll try again. All right, well, I'm back. I have an idea what it is. It's one of the problems at the Air Force Academy. One thing I did is I put the jQuery library, I added it to all the master pages, which basically meant that we can use jQuery anywhere in the environment, but in SharePoint Online, that's not there. So let's see if I can add SharePoint or jQuery itself in there. So I have it in the clipboard where I can go out to code.jquery.com and add in the jQuery library. So we'll try that. I'm in the edit form now. And that would be consistent with the fact that just jQuery itself is not working. So we'll save that. And let's try again. See if third time's a charm. We'll refresh, make sure everything's loaded. Let's open that. And save. Nice, okay. This event conflicts with an existing event. Please find a different date and or time. But if I change that, if I go out and when you're testing something like this, you want to do the boundary condition. So if I go right at the edge, the other one was ended at 2. If I go out to 2, it should work. And it does. So, all right, we're making some progress. So let's go ahead and do the new one. Dialogue, and what we can do, this is a good time that you just really have to have the developer tools here. So we'll go to the source here and see if we can find our page. Let's look here. Actually, the easiest way may be to look at calendar. That's our page. Let's do that and get in. One of the things we're going to have to get into is how do we find this data. So let's start with that, and then I'll figure out how to debug it. You got to get into the right spot here. So let's scroll this entire page. See if we can scroll this down a little bit. There we go. That's what I want. So let's first go look at the Save button. Yeah, so if you look really closely here, you can kind of see it's got this big GUID thing, and then we've got the DIID-IO save item. So that's the actual save button, because what we're trying to do is actually find that button, and it's got a whole if on click. Remember when we saw that pre-save item return false, and then it does all this stuff, web form, post back, all this thing here. So in the end, if you think about what we're actually doing is we find this item, we change its click, we return false from that pre-save item, and then when all goes back through, we call the exact same thing that we were doing before. So let's go back to our check double book. And so this says, okay, we're going to find this save button. So we've seen in some of our other jQuery, the dollar means jQuery, and then this function says it's the document.ready. So when the thing's fully loaded, we run this code. So find the save button, which is where its ID contains that DIID IO save button. If we find it, then we're going to go ahead and grab its name attribute. So let's go back and find the name. That's this whole thing here, this CT blah, blah, blah. Notice, by the way, that we end up calling this again. It's the exact same number that we end up calling. It's basically this whole first parameter. If you look from there to there. So that's going to be in the name. So that's why we grab it. And then we unbind the click and we do our own check for overlaps. Okay, so that's what we want to put a debug on, and then it will call some various functions, some formatting ones, and in the end we're going to call this guy, which we'll see, checks for any conflicts. If there's no conflicts, it's going to call this save custom action, and then it does the save thing. So we do a new web form post back options. There's the name that we put in. We're basically doing the exact same parameters that it would have called otherwise. Otherwise, we put an alert with whatever it was, and then we have our conflict string up here. This conflicts with an existing event. You could change your own one as well. Okay, so easier to see that if we can get it in the debugger. So let's go in there, see if we can find it. It can be a little bit challenging to find it in here, so let me look for a minute. All right, so what we want to do is open the file. So you can see we do Control P here in Chrome, and it shows us the various ones, and that's what we're looking for, because we want to find the new form. That's the one we did. So we do that, and now we can search, and I copied that check for overlaps. Oh, and actually, let's try that again, because it actually has all the files we're doing. So we want to actually find the check for overlaps file itself, because it's got every file that's open here. I have to kind of look for it for a minute. There's our jQuery UI. There's our services. There it is. Or check double book is the name of the file. All right, there we go. So let's do some breakpoints in here. So we'll do that. We'll do our check for overlaps so we can see that, and then we'll eventually want this query succeeded. All right, so let's try that. I'm going to go ahead and edit the or close this so I can get the very beginning one. So let's try it here and see if that works. We'll just do the new form. All right, good. So notice that it's showing here, and I'm going to use the, let's check our things here. Let's see. Oh, I went all the way past it. Let's try it one more time. Here we go. Oh, not finding the one to go straight past it. Hold on. All right, so now I've got it. I'm actually just want to step through it here. And we give ourselves a little bit more space. Oh, I want to step. Let's step out. There we go. Step into next function call. So what I really just wanted to point out is if we go to the save button, you'll see that it's actually got a value. It's mainly is just an object. That's the main thing we're trying to see. And we'll just go through, and then we get our callback ID. So see how it's that big long string I was talking about. And then we'll unbind it and call this function. All right, so now we can step. And we'll make it a little smaller now so we can get to this other dialog. Whoops, I made it a little small. Let's try it again. Here we go. Now I can just step through so we can see what we want. There we go. So let's just say, oh, it's still kind of waiting for us a little bit. Not sure why it's. Let me pull that one off now that we've seen that, and we'll close it again. It seems like it's kind of locked up again somehow. There we go. Huh. See, that's kind of locked out my thing, so I can't really do it right now. It can be a little bit challenging to do the debugging. Get rid of that. There we go. Let me close this for the minute. Not quite sure why that guy is totally locked up right now. Okay, let's bring it back, the F12. All right, it's like we're okay. So I'm gonna say test, and I'm gonna put in an overlapping appointment. So I'm gonna put this from like 1 to 1:30, we'll say. And then we hit save. Okay. So what's going on? Again, I don't want this video to go too long, but the way to figure this out is that we go in and we look at our original dialog box. So the one up above where we type everything in, and we say, okay, what did we put into each one? And so we're trying to find the object. So this is the object where it has a title that says start time, another one, the title that says end time, and then we're finding the hours and the minutes, and we're checking it. And then this is where we can start saying, okay, what did they actually put in? So that's the date that we put in. And then the hours and the date time. So again, if you do this in, we started at, get the hours, the minutes, the hours, minutes, okay. Notice that it changed that to 13 instead of from 1 p.m. And then we're going to go ahead and put a string together. It kind of has it all. So it says, okay, we started at 1 o'clock. And then we start using our JavaScript. And we say, okay, let's turn that into a date object because we're going to need that going forward. So we put, okay, here's the date. And so that's actually a JavaScript date. You can see it up here at the top. And then we're going to, I like to do this a lot. We use the getTime method to turn it into seconds. So that makes it a lot easier so we can do math on it. So if we go past it, so that's like the number of seconds since 1970 or whatever. And then we have to really watch for the time zones and stuff. So we have a function, I won't get into it, but it basically figures out what our time zone is. And then we set up our hours. So this is a 6 hours is for our mountain time zone where we're on. And then we build a whole big thing, you know, of the end date and do basically the same thing. So we do that. The current ID is kind of interesting. And it's null right now, but if we edit it, we got to really be careful. And this came up when I was writing it, is that we end up, if we edit one already in, it's already in the system. It's going to come back and give us the calendar event that is our current one that we're on. And if we don't exclude that, we end up competing with ourselves, and we can't even edit our own event because it thinks that there's already an event there that was going to overlap. Let's say we wanted to make it 15 minutes longer. So we get it, and we basically get it from the URL. And then, okay, so now we're going to see if I can go into the next function call. Yeah, so now we're into that separate, the check recurring events, and this is that code that gentleman wrote. But we go in and we grab the date, and there's some pretty cool stuff. So you have to read this. There's a lot more in the in the book about it. But we use this thing called Camel, which is a special markup language. So we're basically going to go in and do a query and say, okay, give us date ranges overlap, and we pass in the dates and the time and so forth. And we're going to call this web service to come back and give us a list of items. So we'll just kind of step through here. And what it does is give us what are we going to call back? So we basically passed into this. All right, when we're done, we're going to call back our query items exceeded. So when it's loaded all this, we're going to call another function. This is called a callback. So we don't know exactly how long it's going to take. So we just run it. So let's put that through. And then if you see where we're back, we're in the query items exceeded. So it gave us both of these events. So it basically told us, so we're going to go through it, but see what it gave us. It created the end date, the title, there's an appointment, was it an overlapping, because this works with recurring events and so forth. So it passes them back, and then we have a bunch of variables, and we're just going to loop through this and just look for any of them that had a problem. So we go through, so this is the one item that we're on, again, so we can see what's on, but we need to create this from the end date and the event date is basically the start date, and then the end date. So this goes from 1 to 2 p.m. So we'll go through and just step through it. And that's where we do the current ID. Remember I said if we save that as a variable. So if we're on our own event that we were editing in this case, then we wouldn't look at it. But in this case we're not. So we just end up grabbing our data back. So we pull out the string, the date string, we convert those into dates, we convert those into the numbers. Remember the end time and the start time, and then we start doing some calculations. Is it greater than or equal to, end date greater than or equal to, so it's just basically some math. And then we see if there's a conflict. Basically if the beginnings, if here's the beginning and here's the end, if it's anywhere in the middle or if it overlaps in any way, then it has a conflict. And that's what this one is. And you see in this case, there is a conflict. So we break. We don't even check anymore once we find. And if so, we say an alert does that. Okay. And then if we change it, I won't run through all the things again, but see if we can put it up to 4 p.m. to 4:30. Save again. I'll just go ahead and push through it. If we come through here, we'll go through. So there's no conflict. We go do the second one. No conflict, so we step in, we go back. We had saved the whole thing exactly how we want it to do, and it goes in and makes it. So a little bit complicated again, but hopefully that shows you how to use the debugger. It's just critical to get this kind of working. You got to inject the JavaScript and then test it while in the browser, and then you got to test it in a couple of different browsers. That whole time zone offset wasn't a problem in Internet Explorer, but when we went to Chrome, it got things off because it was a 6-hour difference, so I had to put that in. So hope this is helpful. Again, you can get those files from the book. It's in the downloads for it, so if this is a useful thing, that's something you can just literally add, change the name of the list, put those files up with Designer, and you'll be good to go. And then you can dig into it more. So thanks and have a great